Well, it's Valentine's Day. It's time to take a look at an ecchi fan service game and see if it's fun to play or just fun to poke fun of. Gal Gun has always been a favorite of mine with classic on-rail shooters mixed with a lot of perverted humor. I do enjoy this series, and we got a new entry released last year in the series to play today, Gal Guardians. Guys, are we sure we got the right game? This looks like a Castlevania game. Oh, wait, never mind. We get to rescue a girl from a tentacle monster. It's definitely a Gal Gun game. The game starts with Corona angry about being bested again, wandering the Demon Academy and finding a magic mirror. Meanwhile, in the real world, Shinobu and Miya are returning home from a demon hunting trip when they notice their school gets changed into a demonic castle that looks like it was, well, rejected from a Castlevania game. The two quickly change into something that resembles a Castlevania protagonist and then go in to save the school. The game is a parody of Castlevania with many references, but at the end of every stage you do have to rescue a love interest from the other Gal Gun games as you fight the bosses. Overall, I'm intrigued with the idea. Castlevania is about as far from Gal Gun as possible, and having these two characters that were in a game that was meant around loot comedy instead of horror light action game, it's kinda surprising. Remember, one of the main character's most known feat is getting her ass stuck in a window and needing help to get out, which I don't think modern day family friendly YouTube will let me show you that scene, which was hilarious. Nonetheless, putting her in the seat of a Castlevania-esque protect is an interesting choice, and the fact that these two characters made for loot fan service can pull it off says that there was definitely passion in this project. So let's talk about the gameplay. First, you need to know that many of this game's critics are kinda correct in pointing this out. Gal Guardians is meant to be a parody of Igarashi Nintendo DS Castlevania games, and it nails the look and style a bit too much to the point where it looks almost identical that you expect it to copy its gameplay, and it really doesn't. This may quack like a duck and look like a duck, but in actuality it's a pig, and while the pork is pretty decent, it's still not what you expect. Gal Guardians is not a Metroidvania. These are more linear stages and no actual RPG mechanics to work with. You don't level up, and you don't really get any new equipment like you would in an Igarashi Castlevania game. This is a shame, because given enough time and funding, indie crates could create a really great Metroidvania game to end all other Metroidvanias. This could have been a spin-off that got bigger than the franchise that spawned it. Instead, we get these weird open area dungeon-esque stages that are linear in nature. If I had to compare to another game, I would compare it to Mega Man ZX, which was also developed by Indie Creates. While you do get items and stuff that will let you explore areas, when you replay the areas, how the game makes you do it though is, well, really stupidly forced and frustrating. Before I get into more of the bad, let's get into some of the good. The good is typical Indie Creates. The game's stage designs are entertaining and challenging, a bit frustrating in some areas, but I will get more about that in a few minutes. But the stages look like they come from an Igarashi Metroidvania, and almost feel like they do. The game is split into two characters you can control simultaneously, a la Portal of Ruin. They each have their own sub-weapons and standard weapons. For the most part, Shinobu will be more projectile and heavier weapon focused, which is why Miya is more melee focused. Miya also does a lot more damage to the enemies than Shinobu, and she never has to reload her weapons. However, she is very much a glass cannon, which is part of my frustrations with this game. The game is good at making sure you switch out regularly, and one gal is better than the other in certain situations. Enemies that are standing right on the ledge are going to be shot at by Shinobu. Larger enemies standing in the middle of the room, blocking the way, are going to be taken down by Miya. The problem is, again, Miya dies really quickly. So what's the problem? Well, when she dies, you're sent back several rooms just with Shinobu. In this case, if you want Miya back without losing your life, you have to go to an area where Miya died and revive her by pressing Y, and it's the same thing if Shinobu dies. And if both the characters die, then it's game over. Anyways, the problem with this whole setup is the enemies all respawn. So if you have to get past an area where enemies had to be shot on to get to the platformer, and you lost Shinobu instead, and you're trying to get by it with Miya, stick a fork in yourself, because you're probably screwed. There were plenty of times where there were secret passages and stuff that only Miya could get to because she can form cranes, and she died, and I couldn't get back to her as Shinobu. So this type of frustration does happen, and losing a life sends you a lot further back as you have to go back to an official checkpoint. So yes, them being separate life bars and doing this is a bit of a problem. That said, the controls are good. I always have the complete control of my character in any situation, and the platforming and enemies are all interesting enough to battle. So the game is fun. So what are the game's other weaknesses? Well, get yourself some good work boot, because we're wading into some premium bullshit here. If it was tweaked a little, if they had made this an honest Metroidvania, I wouldn't be complaining nearly as much. So, how do they get you to return to old areas to use the new items and power-ups you picked up along the way? How do they make you do that? They don't do Metroidvania backtracking. No, they ghost and goblins you. Yeah, you get to the top and you beat Corona, and then the real villain of the game, Adult Corona, appears. It seems in the future she goes from merry mischief maker to one crazy hellion. Anyways, Adult Corona sends Shinobu and Miya back to the first stage, where they do encounter Rizu, who gives you a few new additions, like being able to fire upwards and fire missiles for Shinobu, and Miya gets a charge shot. With that said, did it have to be Rizu? I think most fans would have liked Hikaru more. He has, until recently, been the face of the cameos for the series. Anyways, back on topic. You then gather the girls you rescued throughout the castle together and find out that Hodai, the protag from Gal Gun Double Piece, is literally trapped in the walls of the castle, but he can help if you gather a few things that would give him a post-time skip Sanji-esque nosebleed. So you have to redo the stage and redo the boss fight to collect those items. This game is decent enough, playing through it once is fun, but it needs to be more fun for me to really appreciate, oh, do this again. But again, I did go through it and see some of the extra areas, grumbling about the padding the entire way, because that's what this is, it's bullshit padding. I went through it again, beat Corona again, and found my way into the dimension Adult Corona was hiding in, and oh boy, can I say, screw this final boss fight, it's absolute hell. My problem with the boss fight here is that this goes for all boss fights, it's just the final boss fight the problems are expanded on. Again, going back to one of the girls dies, you get set back a ways, and you have to go find and revive the girl. It's the same thing on the boss fights too. If one of them gets killed, the fight stops and you get teleported back room, and you have to go into the boss fight and revive your companion. And to be fair, as long as both of you don't get KO'd, the bosses never revive all of their health, just a good chunk of it. It's frustrating, especially if one of the girls' health is at full and you end up killing the other one and you have to restart the boss fight and have them regain a third of their health or more. It's manageable, but it is frustrating. But what happens if you have more than one form? Or in the case of the final boss fight, 3 freaking forms. One with this bootlicker, another with Adult Corona, and finally one with the form that looks like it's rejected from Mega Man Zero. If one of them gets knocked out, you have to clear back to the bootlicker. Sure, his health is a bit lower, but it's still back to the beginning, and it gets tedious. I would rather have had a larger health bar and have both of them get knocked out and lose an actual life and go back to the beginning. But that life means I take more hits and has the 2 or 3 forms. Even if they have to refill back to health, I could go through them in one shot rather than being KO'd when I still have more than half my health all combined, if you understand what I'm saying. I played this at the veteran difficulty pretty much throughout the entire game, but the last boss fight had to be switched to an easier difficulty. It was just so disappointing. It's a shame. The game may have had some challenging moments, but it wasn't this frustrating until the end boss, and I think just some tweaks and changes to the balance would have kept that final boss from being that over-the-top frustrating. Graphically, the game nails the DS entries in the Castlevania series. Castlevania DS games had larger, more detailed 2D character designs, and once the DS was backlit, it didn't have to over-brighten their environments. What we got with Dawn of Sorrow and Portrait of Ruin was just 2D perfection, and it's carried on here. The sprites are 2D sprites, they are very large and well detailed. The backgrounds also could be easily copied and pasted into Castlevania backgrounds. They're that good, and the enemy designs, though knockoffish, are good knockoffish, and with a little more reworking could also fit into a Castlevania game. If I had to describe the music, I would say it's okay, but it's forgettable. I don't remember anything about the music. It wasn't terrible, but at the same time, after I was done, none of it stood with me. It's alright, it's just not memorable. Something I never said about a Castlevania game, by the way. Even Harmony of Dissidence had memorable tunes, even if I may not want to remember some of them, but it did have memorable tunes. Voice acting, though, is kind of odd. We did half a dub. What do I mean by that? Battle grunts, one-liners, and special moves are being done in English, if you choose that option. However, cutscenes don't have any English voiceovers, it's just plain text. But they do that in the sub. That said, they have some decent talent that does a lot of anime dubs, and they have some good voice work. Why we can't have them do the cutscenes, I don't know. It's just kind of odd. Maybe they thought by doing that it would be, again, more Igarashi DS Castlevania-esque, because those games didn't have voice acting in their cutscenes either. But when it comes to things like the background and the character sprites and just the basic gameplay, kind of harkening back to the Igarashi Castlevania games, which were some of my favorite games 20 years ago on the DS and PlayStation. And those games are dormant, if not dead, outside of a Netflix series. So I do really want other independent game companies to step in and really do these games right and do these games justice. Inti Creates could. Here they did just a weird hodgepodge. Rather than going all the way, they have the look and feel down, but they didn't go Metroidvania. This game would have been killer, way better than Gal Guardians, and could have easily stepped up to some of the best DS Metroidvania if they just added some more connective tissue to the gameplay and to the story areas, and because they didn't, it's kind of a letdown. But let's talk a bit more about what the game is and some of the problems I had there. There's some balancing issues. The fact that one of the girls can die so easily and you have to pay a big penalty by going back to a checkpoint and then rescuing her constantly gets tedious. That's my number one gripe about this game, and it really shows its head during boss fights. But overall, I did enjoy myself, frustrations aside, and I would love a sequel. I'd love to see all my complaints be, this was just first game syndrome. Inti Creates went back, they did some study, they did an actual Metroidvania game. It costs a bit more, but Gal Guardians 2 knocked it out of the park, and it is the new Igarashi Castlevania games. I believe Inti Creates could do that. The fact that they didn't is probably the most disappointing aspect of the game. Yes, it's not fair, they never said it was a Metroidvania game, but fans are really wanting a Metroidvania, and the fact that you can show that you pulled off the look and style, You just have to take the next step further into creates. Anyways, this is Tommy the Game Master thanking you for listening to his belly aching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up and please subscribe to the channel. Hope to see you guys soon. Bye.
To me, Maya! I'll protect you, Maya! Maya!